Welcome to Los Cien's intersection of environmental justice and equity program. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We have CJ Mishima from the EPA, who we would like to welcome up to the stage.
Thank you. And thank you for taking me back to class. I learned so much, oh my goodness, and I think that probably preps for the presentation from the Environmental Protection Agency. My name is CJ Mishima. And before I get into my talk, I'm born in San Francisco, and I was raised in the East Bay. I think my early interactions with environmental justice was through my family history. I'm Japanese American, and a lot of my grandparents were in the internment camps. I remember hearing stories from my grandparents about their lived experiences in the internment camps, and was just always thinking about this group of people who were forced to live in the most uninhabitable place in the U.S. They were located in Topaz, Utah. I actually got to go visit last year and got to stand where my grandparents were living for a long period of time, and just couldn't think how a group of people were forced to live in a place like this in the most arid environment, and it was just very eye-opening. But I remember early on that really caused me to have a life and career in the environmental sector of protecting human health in the environment. And as you see, my title is Environmental Justice Coordinator. You're probably like, what is that? What does he do? I am by no means the expert in environmental justice. That was our amazing presenter just now. And the people in this room, you are all environmental justice warriors, and I'm just here to make sure that our agency abides by the principles of EJ in our own work. EPA has historically, have screwed up in many, many ways, and I'm here to try to fix those wrongs in one way or another by just pursuing EJ as a career. So I just want to thank you for giving us that amazing talk, and I really value your experience. And maybe we can chat on the side again later, and you can come give EPA a presentation on EJ. Next slide. Oh, I have a thing. Okay. Down. So, just starting off with our definition of environmental justice, it is defined as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. EPA is a funding agency as well as a regulatory agency. But we really want to abide by those two key words, fair treatment and meaningful involvement. So fair treatment, obviously, is just no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of negative environmental consequences. And again, I want to acknowledge that EPA hasn't been perfect in its many, many years in its existence. And I've only been with the EPA for 3 years, but I do realize I was stepping into a role that bears a large, large history that caused a lot of distrust with communities that have been hit with a lot of environmental issues. And then meaningful involvement. I mean, how many times have people in this room or communities have expressed their issues, expressed what's going on the ground, whether it's asthma from bad air or bad water, and nothing happens from you continuously telling us what's going on. So meaningful involvement to me really means that we're listening, but not just listening, that we're going to develop actions through hearing from your expert knowledge. People in this room are the experts, and we want to hear from your experience of what's going on. If we don't incorporate your knowledge into our decision-making processes, then we're going to go nowhere. I feel like EJ is part of that. It's where we have the tools, the knowledge, and everything else to make real change, but our process is what needs to change. I think it's what the professor was saying beforehand, that we have these barriers in our systems that are embedded, and I just saw that clay example, and I was like, oh my God, that's the EPA. She just mushed it all together, and it's really hard just to take the bits and pieces that have been ingrained in our existence for the last 50 years. But again, when I first joined EPA, environmental justice, the term was just a thought still, and that was 3 years ago. I think it was a volunteer type work. We had a few grants here or there, but since then, we've gotten so much support from my senior staff, from our administration, to actually invest in environmental justice as a component of our work. Next slide. So again, this is just a simple slide of how we view communities that have EJ concerns, we realize it's a cumulative impact type situation. Not one community is dealing with one issue. I feel like we don't want to pit communities against each other either. We're all fighting for the same right of healthy land, water, and air. And we want the places that you live in to be safe. We don't want the park you go to cause your kids asthma, and we want to acknowledge that. Oh, that's a boring slide, sorry. It's EPA Region 9, and if you don't know, we cover California, Nevada, Arizona, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands and 148 federally recognized tribes. And so that's just a little background, I suppose, but boring. Next. But here, so this is a little glimmer of hope. Again, when I started, oh my God, I have 5 minutes, okay. When I started with EPA, we were just volunteer EJ positions, but since then, 3 years ago to now, we have a fully staffed environmental justice team doing the work that I'm kind of mentioning today. So here, we'll share these slides, but we have 11 amazing staff right now. A lot of it is to do with the investments in EJ and more funding opportunities, which I know I'm supposed to talk about in a moment. But again, some of the ways that we're integrating EJ is internally, I feel like for so long, environmental justice is a checkbox to a lot of different programs and organizations, and we don't want to make it a checkbox. We want to make it a component of work that's going to enhance a project, that we need to involve community experts from the beginning of developing a plan. Too often we show you the plan, we ask you for feedback, and we're like, great, maybe we'll take it, maybe we won't. But wouldn't it be better if we involved everyone from the beginning of that process and that planning? Again, it's not an easy solution, but that's some of the ideals that I'm really trying to hone in on with the component of work of environmental justice. And thankfully, we have 11 staff to help do that now versus 1. And again, we're just supporting communities with EJ concerns, and so creating spaces for you all to come talk to us. We do host now a monthly community check-in. So if you ever want to come yell at us, the first Tuesday of the month is the place to do it from 5:30 to 7 p.m., and I will share that link soon. But that's just one way, and we're also trying to be present with everyone. That's why I'm here today. I don't think EPA has ever historically been to this event, and I'm happy to be the first maybe, but we're trying to be on the ground, seeing what's happened. We can listen about it from a Zoom link or a Microsoft Teams link, but until we're there on the ground, you show us what's going on. That's where the real impact sets in our minds. Grants. So that's exciting, I know, but I think that's a perfect example of programs we have within the agency that have barriers within them. Raise your hand if you ever tried to apply for an EPA grant. Anybody in this room? Is it fun? No. Is it? Do you want to apply for our grant programs? No. And even just in my 3 years experience, realize, my goodness, it's a headache. How can we make this easier? How can these funds be beneficial for communities? And I don't have the right answers right now, but we are trying to stand up new programs. And so we do have more funding, which is amazing. We're talking $3 billion that are investing in EJ-related activities to our nation. And so we have about 5 different programs coming through the line. And the first one I really want to highlight, it's called the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, TICTACs. Acronyms are the best, I know, but this program, we awarded 2 in our region of $10 million each to be technical assistance centers, and that's helping CBOs get grant writing experience, just how to manage federal funds, the base level to build your own capacity to one day be more competitive for larger pots of funding. And so this takes away the barrier of going through grants.gov or can't hire a fancy grant writer, but hopefully this program will provide the technical assistance to communities in need. It's a new program, and so I'll share my contact, but be on the lookout for more information being provided later. And this is just some more information on our Technical Assistance Center. They're going to be hosted through the University of Arizona and San Diego State. Who can receive services are all community stakeholders, including underserved communities, community residents, nonprofit organizations, grassroots organizations, local and state government entities, tribal governments. So please be on the lookout if this is something that interests you, and I'm happy to answer more questions. And I have 1 minute left, so I'm just going to go to the other part of why I'm here is recruitment. We're hiring like crazy, which is pretty different or a big change for the federal government. I think this is a huge movement for us as an agency. I mean, we're 50 years old, so a lot of people are either retiring or moving on, but we're having so much more young and bright young minds and to come change the ways we function as an agency. So if you're students or you know students or looking for a career in the EPA, please come talk to me. I entered through an internship program as a grad student. One of my grad colleagues over here who I know, so shout out to our grad program way back in the day, just 3 years. Sorry, I feel like I've been in it forever, but not really. But please, come talk to me after this program about internship opportunities, because it is a new wave. If we can change the agency's mindset with new, bright ideas, then that's the way to do it, you know? And I think that's my chat. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, CJ. And now we would like to welcome back up to the stage Reuben Crowfeather, Standing Rock, Lakota, who will be presenting about how to affect change in the face of power. He will be telling us a little bit about his story at Standing Rock.
Oh, thank you, Jose. If we could have the slide up, por favor. Estoy aprendiendo a hablar español. We really want to be able to communicate with our Spanish-speaking indigenous relatives. And so I'm committed to learning to speak Spanish. But it's also very important that we go back and we research where we come from. The different tribes, the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Dene, the Otomi, the Mishika, the Yaqui, the Chichimeca, all the different tribes that we come from. Do I have a clicker here? Let me see. Mitakuye Oyasin. Okay, here we have an image here. It says, we are here to protect water. Water is life. Mini Wichoni. Can you say Mini Wichoni? It's been a basic, not basic, but at the front of all of our prayers since the beginning of time. We know that water is sacred. And for those of you who are not familiar with our fight in 2016 against the Dakota Access Pipeline, our nation, the Standing Rock Sioux Nation, is located 45 miles south of the biggest city in North Dakota, which is the capital of Bismarck, which is 90% of European American ancestry. And so there in Bismarck, they lobbied the original, the pipeline was set to go just north of Bismarck, but the people there, the community there, they fought against that, and they in turn moved the pipeline down into what is the very border of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. And so again, environmental racism. There, the Dakota Access Pipeline was pumping oil from the Bakkens to what is Illinois. And our people obviously rose up and made a stand and said, no, we're not going to allow this pipeline to go through our lands. And at the forefront of our movement was our children, our youth. And this image here, if you can see, it shows our youth who ran 1,600 miles from Cannonball, North Dakota to Washington, D.C. They ran there during the No Dapple Movement. Many youth groups were formed and created that, like the International Indigenous Youth Council. And these youth went back to their home communities, their home tribes, and they brought the environmental justice fight. Water protectors, the water protectors, they put their lives on the line. Many different actions, non-violent direct actions that they would stand in front of bulldozers, they would cuff themselves to bulldozers, they would stand in front of law enforcement. And you see in the background here of our water protectors is our great chief, Tatanka Iotaka, Sitting Bull. And throughout history, you hear his name, Sitting Bull. And one of his quotes that he left with was, let's put our minds together and see what kind of future we can create for our children. And so in the spirit of Sitting Bull, the water protectors, they faced many attacks by private security firms that came and they brought dogs. They faced the Morton County Sheriff's Department. They also faced the National Guard, who was called in. And you see here some of the images of the brutality, police brutality that they faced there. On to the left there is actually a 20-degree a 20-degree night freezing weather, and the water cannons that they were doused with also had chemicals, and so it was chemical warfare that was brought upon our water protectors, and the chemicals burned their skin, it burned their eyes, and to this day, our relatives, our water protectors, are suffering from PTSD from the abuse that they received there at Standing Rock. No spiritual surrender. Many of them were incarcerated, charged with felonies. They were held in dog kennels. They were held naked, much like you would kind of expect, like with national terrorist treatment. They were treated like terrorists. The No Dapple Movement, there was a lot of positive things that came out of the movement. And here you see leaders from throughout Indian country coming together. You see all the flags representative of all the indigenous tribes that came together. All the indigenous tribes along with our allies who came together. And if it wasn't for our allies, they would have wiped us off the face of the earth. There was a young European American girl who was shot in the head with a rubber bullet, and took her ear off, and that made national headline news, and that's what really got the national attention. How did we fight this institutional racism? How do we fight it? We fought it by education. We used social media, but we went after the corporate sponsors and their banks. And once we started to move into defunding the big oil, then we got the national attention. The youth ran to Washington, D.C. to meet with Barack Obama. And when he was there, he promised them that he would, he ordered an environmental impact study, and which actually halted the easement of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Here he is pictured with our children. It's my niece up there in the corner. And so President Barack Obama came and showed his support. To this day, the environmental impact study has not been done. And so we're waiting for Barack to follow up with that. But as soon as he left office, this guy comes in. And within 72 hours of Donald Trump being inaugurated, his first move that he did was he ordered a fast track to not only expedite the Dakota Access Pipeline, but also the Keystone Pipeline that was going through South Dakota at the time. Again, no spiritual surrender. And the question that I'm trying to look for, that question that they had for me. I didn't get it till just before it came up. And so the very first and foremost of our movement was a spiritual movement. In the beginning of everything that we do, we begin with that prayer. And the first time that I was called to the front line. I got a phone call from my uncle, and he said, Toshka, nephew, he said, we're calling all the warriors to the front line. And at the time, I was 8 hours away in Minnesota. That was about 11 o'clock at night. By 8 o'clock in the morning, I was pulling into our reservation lands. And as I pulled onto our reservation lands, I seen more law enforcement than I've ever seen in my life. It was like the president had got killed or something. I've never seen so many police presence. And at the time, there was just a few women that were lined up, and they were yelling at all the police officers. And I looked around, and I was like, where are the warriors? Where are the warriors? I seen some prayer altars that had been set up. And so they had begun with the prayer. And in the time that we were standing there, we had blocked the road to the pipeline. They pulled in a bulldozer behind the police line, and they built a new road. And so just within that time, within about an hour, they built a new road. And so that was what we were facing. But again, from the prayer that we made, it was the most important component to the fight. How do you affect change in the face of power? You know, we've seen Donald Trump. You know, how do we do that? Voting. The most powerful thing that we have right now in order to combat this is voting, and so we have to get that to all of our allies, all of our people. How does your philosophy and relationship with nature inform your approach to addressing environmental justice? That's a good question. Water is sacred. One of the things that we do in our tribe is that we'll go without water for 4 days. And when you've gone without water for 4 days, you will know the true value of water. Mini choni, that water is life. And that's our spiritual answer to that question. Do I have a timer? We're getting 5 minutes. Okay, so at this time, I would like to answer any questions. Are there any questions? Kind of.
We're here on land.
Yes, sir.
Local officials ignore them most of the time.
Yes, sir.
Can bring them out and they want them to support something that the local power structure wants to do. How can we overcome that kind of co-opting and that kind of hypocrisy?
How can we reach out to our community members here within these lands? It's very simple. It's very simple. We reach out to the tribe. We talk to them. We connect. We connect with them. We need to see a representation at the government level. That's a good question. Any more questions? I'm sorry. I think I need a drink of water. Okay, so let's get back into my thing. This question kind of throws me off here. So as of now, the Dakota Access Pipeline is currently illegally pumping gas as we speak. So people think, oh, did we win? Did we stop the pipeline? No, we did not stop the pipeline. And so we need continued support for that. One of the key things that we learned is that when we mobilize our tribal nations throughout Turtle Island, that we can bring awareness to the rest of the world. And at Standing Rock, that's one of the things that we're very, very proud of. We might not have stopped the Dakota Access Pipeline, but we we enlightened the world about the issue with environmental justice. And so, yeah, I think I'm sorry. I'm getting a little bit nervous here, but yeah, any more questions? I think that's going to wrap it up for me. How do we make those changes? And that's a question, we always, ask ourselves, the personal things that we do, the imprint that we're gonna leave here on this earth. It goes back to the basic, are we gonna recycle? Are we gonna look for alternative energy resources? And how do we do that? That's a good question. What are your thoughts on land acknowledgements without meaningful actions? Oh, I think it's environmental racism right there. It's environmental racism. And again, I'm from the Midwest, South Dakota, Minnesota, and till I came to California, I never heard of a land acknowledgement. I've never heard of a land acknowledgement until I came here. Any more questions? Yeah, so how can they be doing it? Illegally. The way they do everything else when it's not, they go against illegally. I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure about that question though. Thank you. So, okay, at this time, we'll be closing here, and I want to thank you all for your kind attention. I want to thank you all for all the work that you're doing within your communities. And to answer the question, how do we make that change without the spotlight, in our everyday walk of life? Mita kuye oyasin, when we have respect for life, when we have respect for our relatives, when we listen to our relatives who speak about environmental racism, in this room, in this county, we have such a low population of African American blacks. We have a high population of Latinx, but they're facing rent that they cannot pay. Where we have indigenous people here who have no representation, from what I'm understanding here today. And so, again, I thank you all for your kind attention, and I'm gonna leave it at that. I'll hit you to a low.
Thank you to all of our presenters. We would now like to welcome each one to the stage for a Q&A session. So we're going to get these seats ready for all of you.
And if you have any questions you haven't submitted yet via the QR code or written, please submit it now. And if you have a written comment, please lift it so we can come gather it.
So this first question is for everyone. Can you comment on the use of the terms environmental racism versus environmental justice?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think these concepts are definitely related. I do think because I think structurally about power structures. I think we can resist at the local level, of course, and in our individual lives and everything like that. But collectively, when we collectively get together and resist full-on power structures, we need to think in terms of what those are. Some of those names will be familiar to us. It depends on which category of power we're talking about. Capitalism, for example, it is an oppression of the working class and poor by the uber rich, right? The ones who own the means of production. We talk about gender oppression, or cis heteropatriarchy. That is an oppression of people who are not heterosexual, who are not cis men, by those who are, right? And likewise, when we think of it, we were talking about structural racism, which is an oppression of Black, Indigenous, and brown people by those who are white, who are settlers, who are colonizers. And so depending on which category of oppression and power structure you're talking about, you can talk about it under the rubric of environmental justice. Environmental justice pertains very much to several people who are white because they're poor, because they're working class, right? They may be placed in situations, they may be devalued in terms of the local zoning decisions that are made, right? So capitalism, oppresses, in ways that are not racialized as well as in ways that are racialized. It's always kind of racialized, but still there are ways that, environmental justice can apply in that sense. Environmental racism, however, specifically is a specific category of that where I would say it's talking about, the specific ways that structural racism is connected to the environment. So that's what I would say is kind of the distinction between the two.
Sure, I can add on to that. I wanted to hand it off to the experts first, but I think it's just about educating ourselves. You need to learn about environmental racism in order to do the work in the realm of environmental justice. If we don't do that internal work first about learning about everything they mentioned in their presentation today, or if you're not learning what's going on the ground from what you're experiencing and right now, is if we don't have that in my head, then how can I move forward and try to right the wrongs within agencies like the EPA? So I know it's a very basic level answer, but we're all here for reasons to learn, and that's the first big step at how we make our decisions moving forward. So,
for this next question, it reads, what can I do to make the greatest impact on a daily basis?
So this is always an interesting question for me because people love to race to what can I do? And I think doing something is really important. But don't forget that understanding the problem on a deep level is doing something, right? All this study we did, that was we did a lot of study, right? And part of doing something is learning and really trying to get a deep understanding of what the problems are. But besides that, I just have to say, hopefully nobody's mad at me for saying this, but we need to get radicalized. Climate change, or we should say climate crisis and destruction, is real. And a lot of us ain't going to be here too much longer if we don't do something about it. And I don't mean just the normal everyday campaigns, but somebody got to stop it. In its tracks, right? Protest is great. It's only one form of doing something, okay? Protest is great, gives us awareness, that kind of thing. And like he said, water protecting, that's what we should be doing. And when we protect our homes, a lot of times we protect our homes with all kinds of things, including weapons, right? I'm suggesting that if we don't do something really drastic, really soon, we're going to be in trouble. And that's going to mean a lot of death, right? It's not to be the alarmist and, but it's real. Thank you. The other thing is really understanding the impact, not just of ourselves. A lot of times what we like to do is talk about individuals. Okay, I got a car with the battery instead of gas, right? Or something like that. Our own footprints. What we have to understand as a country, our own footprint is way bigger than everybody else's footprint. We have to stop consuming. It is what it is. And that's one of the reasons why capitalism can't be the answer. We have to stop consuming just for no reason. If I were to tell you how much clothes I have in my closet that I don't even freaking wear, right? That consumption is what is killing the earth. If we want environmental justice, this has to be a structural change. And that happens in so many ways. So yes, act locally, react to the problem, but we also have to go on the offensive to the problem.
Would anyone else like to add to that? What can I do to make the greatest impact on a daily basis?
What can I do on a daily basis? At a pivotal time in my life, I had a choice. I was a young leader in my community, and I had a choice of the political or the spiritual. And at the time, I chose the spiritual. And so sometimes when I share my thoughts, I kind of feel like I'm just that person that that people think I'm crazy. But prayer is the most important tool that I utilize each day, and that I teach my children, I teach my nephews, I teach my nieces, my daughters, my sons, my friends, to lead by example that prayer. And they tell us that, everywhere a way of prayer is a good way. It's a good way to do it. But when we do that, we set that spiritual tone from the beginning. In the moment, we center our spirit, we center our heart to our mind, and we put we put what's going to be in front of us, and we go out and we do it. So for me, it's that prayer, and centering myself and staying focused. And I believe with the power of that manifestation of the prayer, that we can make these changes. And like my sister here said, we have to get up and fight. And some of that time, that's the prayer. We have to pray for that strength to stand up. We have to pray for that strength to send our voice. We have to pray for the future. And so again, not to sound cliche, but that's really where I'm at in my life. Thank you.
And I guess to make it cliche, no, I'm just joking. I think just being leaders in your community, like everyone here, is to promote protecting our environment, and just everyone's voice is important. Honestly, I walked in today and saw the lineup of amazing speakers, and I was scared, intimidated, and nervous. Like, what am I gonna bring to the table? But just, I think in the last hour, we're all talking about the same things that we are trying to accomplish. Like, we want the same goals, and I think we all have to realize we're all on the same level, and we are just fighting for the same things. And it doesn't matter, where you're coming from, or if you're a high school senior, just like, how do I make a change? Like, you're doing it now, and the fact that you're here, you're doing it now. So.
All right, our next question is environmental justice about affixing blame and punishment, or recognizing that previous generations and their horrible decisions do not represent the current generation and our point of view, and that the current generation wants to actively participate with our communities of color?
That's a good one. Forgiveness. They say we can't forget, but we can forgive. For our people, so many things that have been done to us. Our people live in a state where they're always ready to crash out. When they learn the true history, they become upset, and they crash out, whether it's in drugs, alcohol, violence, prison. We learn that truth. When we hold that pain, when we hold that, it becomes a sickness to us. Becomes a spiritual sickness. When we learn to let those things go, then Tokatakia, we can go into the future. They say that when we hold on to things, it's like dragging buffalo skulls. And if you heard anything about us, we drag buffalo skulls around. But when you learn to let those things go, you can go forward freely. And so how do we do that, you know? As Oyate Wangila, one nation, you know, not to point blame and point fingers, but at the same time, it takes everybody coming together.
I think if I say, ouch, and someone looks to me to see if what they're doing is causing my ouch, a change is possible, right? But if I continually say ouch, and most people are not looking to see what's causing the pain, to see if there's anything they can do about it, then that means carrying forward. I have to do, not blame, not, you know, in the sense that we usually think of, you know, blame as in, you know, like some kind of bitter thinking, right? But in terms of analysis of what is causing the problem, right? We usually think of blame in terms of something emotional that people do, and because this society is a very cis heteropatriarchal society, we devalue the emotional, even though the emotional is information as well, right? You know, so blame shouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't be a problem for me to say that I am a victim of a certain system, right? But because this society kind of puts this emphasis on don't be emotional, be rational, and don't call yourself a victim. Don't let people put you in that position, right? And there's something to that, right? But there is, like, in fact, like if you go into court and you say somebody hit me over the head and took my wallet, you are in fact a victim of a crime, right? That's factual, right? So like people talk about it in these emotional terms as a way of discrediting it because emotions are associated with women and with other non-men, and that's a disempowered group, right? So I think, you know, shifting our thinking about how we think about these things is part of addressing the problem. But if it would be better for somebody to think about it in a different way than to say blame, right? Because there is somebody to blame. Like when Trump did what he did, he was to blame, right? And all the people who were following him doing it, like Stephen Miller, Stephen Bannon, everything like that, you know, they were also to blame for those problems going forward, right? But if you don't think in terms of blame, you can also think in terms, and I do this myself because you're right, carrying the weight of what we study a lot of times is horrendous, right? It's horrendous to think about these things and to just kind of see, oh yeah, genocide of the Miwok people, you know, depopulation of the African continent, you know, all these things, and just be like, whoa, what am I thinking about? Where do I fit into that? Where do my ancestors fit into that? Where are the people who I love, who I'm related to, you know, connected to, or who I just know, how do they fit into that, right? It's heavy, right? So sometimes what you have to do is you have to kind of take a scientific distance from it and say, I have to conduct an analysis because there is a problem that I want to solve. And whoever is causing that problem to be persistent, even if they don't know it, I have to find a way of addressing them so that they stop, because I'm saying ouch. Everybody like me is saying ouch. The indigenous people are saying ouch, right? Women are saying ouch. You know, queer people, trans people are saying ouch. There is a power structure that is causing them to say ouch, and we need to address the problem.
Yeah, so just to add to that, it's if I'm honest, that's an uncomfortable question for me, because I almost feel like it's pointing at us as if we're the ones blaming and not thinking about what needs to happen. And I just want to say, I will be proud to blame those who are in power, right? I really would like to kind of put that back and say, has racism really ended? Or has it just shifted positions, right? And it looks just a little bit different today than maybe it did at the beginning of the 500 years that we've been going through, right? Could it be that slavery just changed positions? That it was this slavery thing that was everywhere, and then it went to the prison industrial complex and convict leasing, and that still our relationship with the police is one where we can be killed and nobody be punished for it. Is it not that the problem is still there? So let's say you, it's funny, I'm gonna give a plumbing thing. If there was, because he's a plumber, if there was a leak in your house and it was rotting the floorboards, should we be like, well, I don't feel like really talking about this leak? No, guess what? You're gonna call a plumber and somebody's gonna come fix that leak before your house is so rotted that you can't live in it. Let me be clear. We as black people, and I'm gonna say indigenous people and everybody else, time's up. We are done. We have gone through generations after generations after generations. We can talk about slavery. We could talk about braceros. We can talk about all kinds of ways that America goes and gets immigrants when they want them, uses them up, sprays them down with chemicals, and then sends them back. We can keep talking about it, or we can do something about it. I don't have time necessarily to worry about whose feelings are hurt with pointing the finger. Because guess what? My literal life is at stake here. People of color's literal life is at stake with environmental racism. I have friends, we've been to South Africa several times, I lived there. I have friends who literally don't have access to water and electricity. So I don't have time for worrying about who I'm blaming. I have time for us to sit here, think about what is the problem. Racism is a problem. Some people aren't benefiting from it. Some people at the expense of others. And I have to, even as myself, as a cisgendered woman, I know that I'm benefiting from something that transgender people and non-men are not, or transgender people are not benefiting from. Right? I'm benefiting from it at the expense of them. So I'm fine. I want to do everything. You can put the blame on me, because I want to do everything that I can do to make sure that that doesn't happen. My children and my children's children should not be talking about the same crap that we're talking about. But yet, we are here talking about the same crap since the beginning of America. So it's time to stop. Time's up. We don't have any more time.
That was amazing. I want to talk to you more. I think just out of this question and with all that experience that was just shared, I received 2 pieces of advice from Robin Collins. She's now the Senior Advisor of Environmental Justice to Michael Regan and all of EPA. But she told me, keep running until someone tackles you. And if you get tackled, just get up and keep running again. And that was just kind of a quote to how you approach your work and whatever career level you are at currently, and that's how you make change. The second piece of advice, especially when your work is rooted in working with communities, is I think on the opposite side of blame is for all of us to own up to our mistakes. So often we're just running away from a mistake we might have made, and you can see that in many examples where we're just shifting blame here or there just to not be responsible. But me personally, in my personal life and my professional life, I think that's something we can all work on, is just right away say, I screwed up. Let me try again, especially with EPA, we're standing up so many new programs. We acknowledge we're probably going to screw up a lot. But if we don't screw up, we're not going to make the best program that will help communities in need. And so I just took those 2 pieces of advice very to heart and really root them in the way I function as a person and in my professional life now too. So that's...
Are there any final words before we close our program?
I have a final
Oh, yeah.
I always have words. I'm a Taurus. I talk all the time. Okay? But, for me, the final word is to think of things like this. There's an inertia that's going on that started with the beginnings, probably before America, but the beginnings of America. An inertia of capitalism, of racism, patriarchy, these different types of things, right? And that inertia is going to keep going even if we do nothing. We don't even have to push it. We don't have to intentionally want to hurt people. It's just going. And if we don't, if we want it to stop, we have to stop it. We have to dismantle these systems and create new ones. You can't just sit back and think it's going to end. It's going to get bigger. If you think of it like a snowball and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you have to actually dismantle it, actually put some action towards it. And to me, that's where we're moving. That's what we want to do. Stop that snowball and get off the hill or something, you know, and like figure out how we're going to make a different system.
Yeah, and just kind of piggyback off of that, if we all made different choices in our lives, like it could hypothetically happen, right? That each individual in here, each individual in this room, in our world, could make a different choice tomorrow. Like not tomorrow, like immediately, right? You can start a new life, a new year at any moment. Time is not bound by the Gregorian calendar, right? Like we could decide to stop pumping oil out of the back-end fields through the unceded indigenous lands, right? We could decide to do that. But if we chose to do that, if it somehow happened, something would happen that would lead to other choices that we would then have to make. If we respected indigenous lives and land and traditions that much, something else would have to happen because so much is connected to that, right? And at the end of that, there would be other things that we had to choose. And at the end of that, there would be still other things that we would have to, other choices we would have to make. By the end of what happened, we would not necessarily recognize the thing that was in front of us as America or the thing that was in front of us as the modern world. Because the modern world is so much based on indigenous death and genocide, so much based on enslavement and death of Africans and black people, right? So much based on the dispossession of poor people, right? We would not recognize it. But what I think we pray, my prayer, is that we can let go of the vision that we have of this modern world, this world that we live in now, enough, and just focus on the people who need us to let go of that vision. Their lives depend on it. Our lives depend on it, right? We could hypothetically do that. I will not hold my breath, but we could do that. We could take the moment to make that change. And at the end of what the changes that we would have to make, we would not recognize what we would see, and hopefully, my prayer is that that would be just fine.
Oh, thank you. At Standing Rock, one of the things that we learned is that the corporations, they will stop at nothing. They will stop at nothing. The law. So what we need to do is educate our youth. Again, the youth were at the forefront of our movement. Education, filing lawsuits, and for all you people out there right here in this room today, the future is dependent upon you. To the work that you guys are doing, the things that you're going to be doing, and we need you. We need these voices. We need these strong feminine, these strong masculine voices, these strong voices that haven't been heard for so long. And so I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for for having us here today, to Los Cien for inviting myself to speak and to share this day with you. And I wish you all a great week.
I'll just say Earth Day is every day.
Can we get an enormous round of applause for our incredible speakers? Please shower them in love and prayers. The future is changing right here. And we will just close with a commitment from Los Cien. This is the first of many conversations. Los Cien is committed to continuing to cover this topic, and we hope you will continue to embody what you learned here today and join us for all of the conversations as we continue to lean into environmental justice. We have enormous gratitude to our incredible speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise and prayers with us. Thank you to our audience for being a part of this conversation and engaging and taking what we've learned today and embodying it through action immediately. What can you do? Anything. Just get started.